A man sits nervously in his car, clearly hesitant about something he's about to do. He then calls the police and reports that a crazy man is robbing the Continental Bank on San Pablo Street.
Un loco está robando la sucursal del Continental en la calle San Pablo.
After hanging up, he waits in his car, watching the bank. Soon he hears sirens in the distance and drives straight into the glass doors of the bank. At that moment, the police arrive. The man, N, steps out of his car and approaches the officers, confessing that he committed a crime and asking to be arrested.
Arréstame.
Before all of this, N is in a therapy session with his therapist, Alberto. When asked about his beliefs, N remains silent. Alberto tells him the scorpion and frog fable, but his version is different. In this version, the scorpion jumps on the frog to cross the river, but in the middle of the crossing, the frog betrays the scorpion and makes him fall into the water. The scorpion is shocked by the betrayal and asks why, and the frog simply answers with indifference.
Y la rana contesta, ¿a mí qué?
After hearing the story, N gets up, puts on his headset, and leaves without saying a word. He walks through the streets silently without glancing at anyone. He goes to the hospital where he sits next to his sick mother's bed, playing a game as she lies there. After a while, he gets up and heads home. At home, his sister asks if he visited their mom at the hospital and doesn't say anything. With his headset on, he doesn't respond or even hear her. She tells him that dinner is ready, but he ignores her and walks straight to his computer. She follows him into the room and keeps asking him questions, but he continues to ignore her because his headset is still on. She eventually takes the headset off him and puts it on to hear what he's listening to. After a moment, she gives it back. She then asks what he's doing on the computer. N is booking an appointment at the civil registry. During dinner, his sister tries to talk to him, but N keeps ignoring her. Frustrated, she yells at him, and only then does he look up and say that he shouldn't see Alberto anymore. She tells him that if he's not going to continue with his therapist, he will have to move back home.
Si tú dejas de ir al psicólogo, te vuelves a tu casita. Ya lo sabes.
The next day, N goes to see Alberto. During the session, Alberto asks him what he is in his dreams, and N simply says nothing. After that, N tells Alberto that he is going to change his name. When asked what he plans to change it to, he doesn't give an answer. Alberto recommends that he try looking at people while walking in the street and choose one person at random to focus on. N asks why but doesn't get a clear explanation. Later, he follows the advice. As he walks outside and even while on the bus, he starts looking at random people around him, picking someone at a time to focus on. Afterward, he goes to the civil registry to change his name. The woman working there tells him he needs an appointment and gives him a form to take home. Back home, he tells his sister that he's going to change his name. When she asks what name he's changing it to, he tells her nothing, which she doesn't take seriously. She jokes that it suits him and how practical it is. N ignores her and goes into his room.
Igual también puedes pedir la invalidez y así me dan una pensión por cuidar de un subnormalito.
Later on, he visits a church. He sits alone in one of the pews. While he's there, a man approaches and starts talking to him about the pronunciation of different names. The man asks if N believes in God, but N doesn't. The man also asks if he has children, but N says he doesn't. He then explains that his wife died in a car accident.
Mi mujer se murió en un accidente de coche.
They keep talking, and over time, the man begins to realize that N is mentally unstable. He eventually tells N that he will be closing the church in an hour and then leaves him alone.
Cierro en media hora. Aprovecha.
Back in therapy, Alberto keeps telling the story of the scorpion. When the scorpion asks why the frog drops him, the frog responds cautiously, saying the scorpion might sting him. In the end, the scorpion stings the frog anyway. When the frog asks why, he has no way to cross the river. The scorpion then tells him he will simply find another frog.
Ahora voy a ir a buscar a otra rana.
Suddenly, N announces that he knows exactly what he wants to do, though he refuses to share what that is. He then walks outside, moving through rows of parked cars and scratches and damages the surface of several vehicles. Later, N goes to the civil registry and asks for his name to be deleted. His sister is there too, saying she is present to witness whatever is about to happen. The civil registry official tells him that he cannot delete his name, leading to a heated argument between N and the man. Finally, N asks whether his ID number can become his new name. The official replies that a name must contain a letter, so N decides to add a dot, essentially creating a name made up of a symbol and a code. The official eventually gives up and prints out a confirmation document for him.
Recibirá una carta en unos días.
Afterward, N goes to a supermarket. He pushes items from the shelves into his cart carelessly, letting many fall to the ground. Then, without paying, he walks outside and smashes the cart into a parked police car. The officers step out of the car to stop him, but instead of fleeing, N pleads to be arrested. When they refuse, he goes back into the supermarket, puts on safety glasses, grabs a fire extinguisher, and smashes the supermarket's glass doors. The police finally arrest him, and at the station he is handed a paper and told to leave. But N wants to stay in prison. He asks if he could at least spend the night there, but the officer refuses. N insists on being arrested, but eventually the officer grows tired of his demands and forcefully pushes him out of the station. The next day, N appears in court. When the judge calls him forward, N responds using his ID number, having officially changed his name. He continues asking to be imprisoned, but the judge refuses and instead issues him a fine. Outside the courthouse, he asks his lawyer if he would be arrested for refusing to pay the fine. Frustrated, the lawyer tells him to simply pay it and move on. This angers N further.
Ahora te vuelve a casa, pagas la multa y a partir de ahora descafeinado. ¿Te parece?
He storms off toward a car where his sister is waiting for him. During the drive, N begins to speed aggressively. His sister, growing terrified, pleads with him to slow down. She tries everything she can to calm him, even mentioning his late wife, but he doesn't listen. Soon, police begin following them. His sister tries again to reach him emotionally, calling him by his old name, but this only makes him angry, since he now identifies only with his ID number. Eventually, he parks the car and tells his sister that he is a tax-paying citizen and has the right to go to prison. He orders her to get out of the vehicle and then crashes the car into a gas station. Later, he returns to court. This time, he agrees that he should be imprisoned. But again, the judge denies the request. He becomes more agitated and even threatens the judge, but still receives no approval to be jailed. Frustrated, N walks straight to a prison facility and tries to enter. He asks to be let in, but a guard stops him. When he attempts to run past, the guard strikes him with the handle of his gun and warns him that he cannot enter. N backs off, dazed and defeated. While walking away, he sees a rabbit and picks it up. He carries it to a sewer entrance, opens the cover, and drops the rabbit inside. He tells the rabbit it is now free and follows it underground. Afterward, an idea strikes him. He returns home and orders a package containing tools, an axe, a hammer, and a shovel. When the tools arrive, he steals a bicycle, rides it back to the sewer, and begins digging into the underground walls. This becomes his new routine. Every day, he follows the same cycle. He goes to therapy, returns home, steals another bicycle, rides back to the sewer, and keeps digging. One day, while N is digging in the sewer, a man suddenly emerges from the other side of the tunnel and runs off. Curious, N enters the passage the man came from and follows it all the way through. Eventually, it leads him into a prison cell, the same cell the other man had been digging his way out of. Realizing what's happened, N lies down on the prison bed and falls asleep. The next morning, the guards discover him. They are confused and unsure who he is or how he got inside. As a result, N is taken back to court. This time, the judge finally gives up and sentences him to 2 years and 2 days in prison. However, the judge also makes it clear that he will do everything possible to get N out early, refusing to be manipulated or fooled again.
Usted a mí no me la da.
Despite that, N has achieved what he wanted. After receiving his sentence, he runs to his sister and hugs her. On the day of his imprisonment, he is freshly shaved and fully prepared. His sister, April, drives him to the prison. As they say goodbye, he calls her by her name, something he had never done before.
Gracias por traerme, Abril.
Nunca me llamas Abril.
Once inside, N is given personal items and then directed to the warden's office. The warden sits down with him and expresses that he has been looking forward to meeting him, having heard many things about his unusual case. After the meeting, N is shown to his cell. The next day, he sits for a meal with other inmates. He sits down confidently, and the others are surprised by how calm and fearless he seems. Later, during break time, N approaches several inmates and asks if they could smuggle something for him. None of them respond, and they all ignore his request.
Está prohibido.
Depende de lo que sea, ¿no?
While in the bathroom, N is approached by another inmate. N questions why there aren't any towels. As they talk, another prisoner enters. The first inmate explains that towels are no longer allowed in the cells because that particular prisoner once used one to kill someone. Later, N is violently beaten. April comes to visit him and expresses her concern. She tells him that she plans to call their lawyer because she believes he cannot keep living like this. N refuses the idea, saying he wants to stay. This disagreement turns into a full-blown argument. April is determined to get him out, while N is just as determined to remain in prison. The conflict escalates until they reach a breaking point, with emotions running high between the two siblings.
No pienso salir.
¡Te saco yo! ¡Te saco yo! ¡Sales!
Back in his cell, as N is sitting quietly, another prisoner enters and asks what he is in for. The prisoner sits next to him and begins flirting. N resists, pushes him away, and asserts his boundaries, making it clear that this space is his and that the other prisoner should leave. Later, while being escorted to the prison's medical area, N notices the man that escaped through the tunnel he dug being escorted back. During the medical checkup, the prison doctor questions N about his beliefs, his past, and especially about his wife, her background, how she died, and whether he played a role in it. N explains that it was a car accident and reveals that she had been pregnant at the time.
Le golpeó un camión de lado.
When asked directly if he was responsible for her death, N goes silent. The doctor then finally tells him she heard other psychiatrists talk about him. The doctor tells him he now has two choices, either to live burdened by guilt or to continue acting like a child.
O puede aceptar que es un niño. Así de simple.
She already knows his story and doesn't really care about it. Still, she tells him that he has a chance, a rare opportunity to truly get to know himself. But from the way he's acting, it's clear he's going to waste that chance.
Y me basta mirarle un segundo para saber que la desaprovechará.
N then begins to speak. All he ever wanted was a single day without having to make a decision. She reminds him that he was just a lathe operator, a job that didn't even carry much responsibility to begin with.
¿Cuánta responsabilidad es esa?
She finally suggests that he believes in God because that way he doesn't have to take himself seriously. N asks the prison doctor if she could help him stay in prison, but she bluntly tells him that she will not assist in keeping him there. After the appointment, he is transferred to a new cell, this time with a roommate. N doesn't want to stay with anyone and requests to be moved, but the guards ignore him.
No está bien. Tengo derecho a estar solo.
His new cellmate, Julian, introduces himself. N remains silent, offering no response or engagement. At night, Julian begins talking about a riot that is going to happen soon inside the prison. He says that the one who will start it is a man named Marcus. As the conversation continues, Julian grows more curious about N's presence and asks why he's there. N simply tells him that he wants to be there. Julian then shares that he is in prison for murder. Over time, Julian becomes increasingly loud and irritating. He then starts to sing.
En mi reja del penal.
Still, N keeps living there quietly. At night, he starts trying to break the metal bars from the cell window. After a while, he finally succeeds in loosening the grill. He then begins tying his sheets together to make a rope long enough to escape out the window. As he is trying to do that, a guard walks to the cell. Hearing this, N gets on the bed and pretends to be asleep. After the guard walked away, he got up again to continue his attempt. Julian wakes up and notices what N is doing, and surprisingly, he decides to help. Together, they secure the makeshift rope to the window, and Julian helps N climb out. Once outside, N starts running across the prison yard. Several other inmates see him and begin following, but when a guard appears, the group scatters in different directions. The alarm blares across the prison. In the chaos, the others abandon the pursuit, but N is eventually caught and taken to the warden's office. The warden begins to mock him deliberately, going out of his way to provoke him. He tells N that he chose to have his office in the basement as a constant reminder of the kind of work he does and the people he deals with.
Para acordarme de mi función aquí.
In the warden's office, N is reminded of the true purpose of prison, not to rehabilitate or teach people to be better, but to punish them and remove them from society.
Les apartamos a ustedes del exterior para que paguen. Eso es.
The warden tells him that he is becoming a serious problem. N responds by apologizing, saying that he doesn't want to be a problem. He simply wants to stay in prison. Despite this, he is removed from the office and taken to a high-security confinement cell. Once inside the confinement unit, an officer begins physically assaulting him, shouting at him to get up and move. N struggles to stand, but eventually does. The officer informs him that he has 15 days left until his court hearing and warns him not to speak a word until that day comes.
He dicho silencio.
After the officers leave, N remains in the confinement cell. The cell is in poor condition and the living situation is difficult, but he doesn't complain. He's getting exactly what he wanted. Over time, he begins experiencing vivid hallucinations. He sees himself dancing with his wife, and a young boy appears beside them. The scene is peaceful, but then something happens to her. She begins to slip away, and he tries to call her back, begging her not to go. In the middle of this vision, he is jolted awake by an officer. The officer starts questioning him, asking how he managed to make the people around him care about someone like him. N doesn't have an answer. As they speak, other officers begin to enter the cell.
¿Qué cojones está pasando aquí?
The first officer suddenly turns on him and starts beating him. He pretends that N had said something inappropriate and claims he was trying to stop him from causing trouble. The other officers believe the act.
Le he dicho que se callara, que tiene prohibido hablar.
Eventually, the day of N's court hearing arrives. During the session, the court reads out his past actions. N tries to explain himself. He speaks about how he made efforts to fix everything in his life but failed. He mentions that he lives with his sister because he's afraid of being in his own home. He expresses his frustration with the world and his own existence. He begs the court to let him stay in prison because he believes that's where he truly belongs. Despite his plea, the court rejects his request and orders his release. N refuses to leave, forcing the officers to physically push him out of the prison. Outside, April is waiting for him. She drives him back to her home. As they sit and eat together, she begins to talk about how their mother reacted to the news of his release. Their mother shows no sign of caring whether N is out of prison or still trying to get himself locked up again. N sits in front of her as if nothing had happened, emotionless. That calmness pushes her over the edge. She begins breaking things, dusting off the table violently, and then flips the table over entirely. Overwhelmed, she sits across from him and slaps him, screaming out her anger over the absurdity of his actions. Later, N sits down and starts researching new prison laws. As he scrolls through updates and legal articles, he reads about the riot that is reportedly happening that very day. He suddenly becomes paranoid, pacing around and calling Abril's name over and over, insisting that it's happening. He turns on the television and the news confirms the riot. Chaos has broken out in the prison. He begins rambling to himself, saying that this is important. Without warning, N rushes back to his room and starts pulling out tools, determined to use them. Abril tries to stop him, pleading with him not to hurt himself, but he insists he needs to go now because it's important. Eventually, he manages to push past her, escape the house, and steal a bicycle. He rides all the way to the prison. By the time he arrives, the facility is already engulfed in chaos. Prisoners are breaking objects and burning the place. At this point, a journalist gets inside saying he is from the press. N sneaks in with him. Inside, an inmate notices N and takes him to Marcus, telling him he'd be pleased to see him. N is taken to a room Marcus is in. The journalist also gets in and introduces himself as Dick Tucker from ABC. Tucker tells Marcus that he can use his platform to talk about the harsh environment the prisoners live in. Marcus, ignoring the offer, starts telling him about what kind of people are in the prison. He tells the journalist that he doesn't trust him, believing he came with a hidden motive. He then points at N, telling everyone that this one, N, is different. He says N is here for nothing. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to be there. After kicking the other man out of the room, Marcus assigns N the responsibility of writing out the group's demands and requests to the police. 1 month later, the court reconvenes to continue N's trial. The judge requests that N stand. He begins by stating that many people have come forward to testify throughout this lengthy legal process. Among the witnesses are the prison warden, N's therapist, the prison doctor, correctional officers, several inmates, and even his sister were all brought in to speak about N and his behavior. When N asks if he could talk, the judge denies the request. The judge continues telling him he is in handcuffs because the prosecutor explains he should be. N agrees with this decision. After listening to the testimonies, the judge doesn't have any intention of sending him back to prison. He still can't seem to understand what N thinks he would find there. The judge bluntly tells N that he thinks he is the unfortunate product of an ill society and feels no sympathy for him. In the judge's view, N is a spoiled individual who blames society for all of his own failures. If it were up to him, he would deny N's repeated requests to remain in prison because he believes that would be the only form of real punishment for someone like N. However, the judge also admits that his role is not to punish based on personal belief, but to uphold and enforce the law. As a result, the judge rules that N will be transferred out of his current prison and placed into security confinement in another city. N, unsatisfied with the decision, demands more, saying that this isn't enough and that he needs a physical restraint to truly feel punished. The judge refuses, prompting N to explode in frustration. N begins shouting at the judge, accusing him of not doing his job and threatening to kill someone if that's what it takes to remain incarcerated. Calmly, the judge tells him that such threats will get him nowhere. Following this outburst, N is transferred to a maximum security confinement prison. Once locked up there, N's mental state continues to unravel. Alone and agitated, he goes to the wall of his cell and begins violently banging his head against it. Following the incident, N is taken to the prison doctor for treatment. Meanwhile, back in his cell, officers begin installing wall padding to prevent him from injuring himself again. But once he returns, N immediately tears down the padding and repeats the same behavior. He is sent back to the doctor. This time, with no other options left, the staff restrain him. He is tied to his bed for his own safety. The officers are now responsible for feeding him and cleaning up after him. Eventually, while restrained and lying in the bed, N finally is happy, and for the first time, he appears to be satisfied.